to today's webinar. This is the webinar about the control of costs for recovery, Recovery Spending Watchdog. We are very much thankful to the European Union for the support of this project. Its participants is the Center of Economic Strategy, Institute of Economic Research and Political Consultation, Technology and Progress, all members of the coalition. Very happy to welcome you all at this webinar. And I am going to be your moderator today, Deputy Head of the Center of Economic Strategy. My name is Maria Repko. Today we will talk about what has happened in January and February with the recovery, with the taxes, what has been recovered, what is not yet, but we are still expecting it. And the special topic is the barrier-free recovery, which is very much a priority for Ukraine. In the first part of our meeting, my colleagues Volodymyr Landa and Oleksandra Betliy, the senior experts of the Center of Political Research and Consultation, will look at the news from recovery. And we have also the new RDNA from World Bank, the overview what Russia has ruined. Then we will talk about a special topic about barrier-free recovery, and I will present the guests before our discussion. Please put your questions in chat, in Q&A. Many thanks to everybody for coming over, and I'm passing the floor to my colleague Volodymyr Landa. He will present the RDNA review and procurement in the sphere of rebuilding and recovery. The floor is yours. Volodymyr, very happy to welcome you all. Allow me to share my screen, part of my presentation. Hopefully you can see my screen and we can start. Yes, so the World Bank has prepared the RDNA 3 document. That's the document which does the rapid damage and needs assessment of Ukraine. Quick and rapid, because the first assessment was quite quick. The second coincided with the anniversary of the full-scale invasion in February 2023. And now we have already the third assessment, which is dated to February 15th. This assessment is aligned with the European Union, the World Bank and the United Nations from the period from 24th of February 2022 to December 31st, 2023. In case you have seen the document, which is called RDNA 2 1 year ago, this document will not be a surprise for you, because the figures are not that much. The total amount of direct losses increased by only 13% to reach $152.5 billion. This is the needs assessment in recovery, and the estimated recovery needs increased by 18% to $486 billion. With this, the estimated recovery need remains at $15 billion. We will talk about this in each case. This is, of course, the housing sector, the transportation infrastructure, and you can also see that there are a lot of other components which have not only this type of breakdown, but much more detailed. We have the RDNA 3 document, where we can get a lot of additional replies. We want just to show you the basic breakdown. First of all, on the graph, you see how the losses grew in various RDNA assessments, both the direct losses and the needs for recovery, and secondly, how it is broken down by sectors. RDNA 3, it's not only additional losses, it's also re-evaluation of several indicators. We can see that we had a lot of re-evaluation in industry. They grew by 3 times, as well as transport, which fell by 20%. So why this has happened? There is the explanation in the RDNA report, irrespective of the fact that there were certain changes related to the attacks on the port infrastructure. This was overweight with 16 to 34% of transportation component was decreased in RDNA 3. If we talk about the regions, we can see that the bordering regions, including Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, it's most of the losses. We can see that the 9 western regions were the least affected, accounting for only 0.8% of the direct losses, and most losses are recorded in the frontline regions, including Donetsk, Kharkiv, and Luhansk Oblasts. We can see also in dark red the Kherson and Kyiv Oblast, and in Kherson we know that the front line is going over it. Once again, more detailed figures are in RDNA. Regarding the needs for 2024, we are making this breaking down. We can see that these figures, they have enough justification, what originated from what. If you're searching for agri-sector, it is in this terminology, it is included into the industry. In other, it looks much more understandable. It's important to mention that this $15 billion, this is the need, but this is not the money that is already there for recovery. The report says that more than $9.5 billion, it's the deficit where we need to find the source of financing, and that's the 62% of the necessary volume. And in addition to the recovery projects, we have also the projects for some $3 billion, which are not part of RDNA, but which are processed by the government of Ukraine. This all what concerns RDNA. Allow me to jump to another section, to the analysis of recovery procurement. This is the quietest months in recovery. 3.4 construction procurements are announced throughout the months. The total amount of 3.5 billion hryvnia. If we were to compare it with the previous January, that's the decrease to January by 11%. But if we compare it with December, it's by more than 5.4 times decrease. Most of the changes were small. They were made without the use of the electronic system. 12 were made in the form of open tenders with special features, and the remaining 2% were made under other procedures, while 86 of procurements were made without this use of electronic system. Who are the largest organizers of procurement? Unlike the previous year, where the biggest organizers were the Department of Construction and the Recovery Agency, now it's the energy companies in front of all, and also the winners. These are the ones who can build shelters for the critical infrastructure. And these are the biggest tenders that we had in 2024. We will not stop here because they are way lower than they were in the previous months. The biggest tender in January in 2023, for instance, was from 2 to 5 billion hryvnia per tender. Therefore, the journalist research also are on hold a little bit. I wanted to specifically mention that one of the biggest researchers, biggest info, was attacked informationally. The team was the beneficiaries of this research tried to bring the reputation down, but we can see of these journalists, but we can also see that the focus is changed. Biggest focus is given to housing, and also the regional mass media are joining. We are very much thankful to them for this. So we hope that they can really monitor the situation in dynamics. Thank you very much. Thank you, Volodymyr. I would like to remind everybody that that's our already sixth monitoring for the Recovery Spending Watch, and all issues are available on our website, Big Recovery Portal, on the websites of organizations, as well as on our Facebook. From month to month, we are repeating the structure, and we're trying to tell you about the most important things. Now, I would like to ask Oleksandra Betliy, the senior expert of economic research and political consultation, what else happened in the sphere, and also Oleksandra will present our view on the special topic of the month, the barrier-free recovery. I can see that in Q&A we have already the first question. Sasha, please, maybe you can do this, the first one. So what is this barrier-free recovery, and when you present your topic? Welcome to everybody. Let's first of all go to our ordinary structure of presentation. Throughout the last months, not that much has happened, but from what we wanted to emphasize, that we're again awaiting the draft law on recovery, which was developed by a working group set up by the Ministry of Recovery. Why it's important? It's important because this draft law proposes to make DREAM mandatory for recovery and reconstruction projects. Everything will be on DREAM, and this will simplify the job not only for monitoring, because the monitoring by itself is not just a job by itself. It will make it possible to make conclusions what kind of recovery is most effective and what should be done to make it better and more active. Also, from other important things, amendments were made to resolution number 118 on the procedure for using the fund for liquidation of the consequences of armed aggression. Projects that started in 2023 are funded on a priority basis. Also very interesting was that from the reserve fund, we talked about it several times, already was spent a lot of money. Half of the money was already spent from the reserve fund. This is, first of all, the money allocated for defense to build the fortification structures. If we said earlier that the urgent recovery will be partially done at the expense of the reserve fund, unfortunately, there is too less money here. We are very much thankful to the data receiving from the Ministry of Recovery. Really, recovery and construction go hand in hand. At the same time, we have attacks on other facilities, and people would need to still get their services from education and health. And we're talking about the administrative buildings. So on this graph, you have seen how many buildings were damaged and ruined and how much has been recovered. Of course, it's understandable that in the first place, we rebuilt the objects that were damaged. It looks like there is still a lot in front of us. We need financing. And if we talk about the funds from the local budgets, this is not all the money. So we rebuilt, if you can see the structure, mostly this was allocated for the multi-story buildings, energy infrastructure, private houses. That's our compensation of what we repay. When we talk about DREAM, although DREAM is not mandatory, the number of projects keeps rising, including the rise of needs in financing. Over the last months, versus our previous monitoring, we added 427 objects. That's quite a lot. And 53.3% of these projects are in the progress of execution. So we have plus 50 more billion hryvnia. This is the need for financing. This is exactly the recovery and reconstruction projects that we're talking about. That's why it's important that we would have money for these projects. And if we talk about what is biggest share, the biggest share comes to construction works and construction materials, but partially also for the procurement of equipment. But we can see there is a huge difference in various districts, in various oblasts. It's very interesting that the taxes are also put in the project, but for me it was quite peculiar, and I'm a fiscal worker myself, that taxes are from 5 to 10% in the Kiev Oblast. Also, we have seen how much money we would need, especially for the projects that we have in Dream. Of course, we don't have all the projects in Dream, but at the same time, unfortunately, this year, we still have problems with financing. That's what is expected, at least for the time being. We planned to spend to liquidate the consequences. And in the beginning of the year, we had 23.7 billion hryvnia. Now we can state that we don't have that money in the fund because it is exactly some 12 billion hryvnia was sent to the projects of regional administrations when they received financing. So in accordance with the budget code, they should have been returned to the state budget. So now they actually returned to oblast military administrations for these projects. Of course, the works have been started and we need to continue that. 1.6 billion was given to the Agency of Restoration. A number of ministries also was given, but also there was the decision, a governmental decision about allocation of funds. This is the money for the urgent recovery projects, some also experimental projects for the comprehensive infrastructure. That's for the water pipeline related to the blowing up of the Kakhovka dam, as well as the protection of critical infrastructure. So now we don't have money in the fund. One of the potential sources of potential money for 2024, it's confiscation of Russian assets. Therefore, we're saying that we have to work more actively on that. The recovery will be financed with the international donors' money from the World Bank. Japan has sent $50 million already to repair housing, and it is also foreseen some 11 billion hryvnia is foreseen to finance various recovery projects, which are financed in the first place by a number of loans from the programs from the European Investment Bank. We should continue to repeat that this is the money that was put in the budget. Factually, we will be able to get more if we have the capacity of local authorities. That means that the local authorities can write up high-quality projects if they go through the approvals through commissions and get financing. There will be also a high-quality implementation. I want to once again emphasize that this financing amounts for recovery and reconstruction, they don't take into account the funds for the support of the business, which is accounted for in the regional financing, which is mentioned in the RDNA. All the recovery of business, 579 grants, etc., everything is there. When we come to barrier-free approach in recovery, you mentioned about the definition, but let us first start that from the point that the Ministry of Recovery, when we talk about the barrier-free approach in recovery, that's the principle of build back better. We say that we have to recover better and quicker, and most important thing is that these recovered objects that they would be accessible for all categories of people, to make sure they could reply and meet the principles of the universal usage defined in our strategies. Just a few figures which have struck me. Once again, when I'm expecting even more even interesting reports and speeches from our invited speakers. But from my side, it's very interesting to know that 22% of buildings today are accessible, 32% are partially accessible. So our premises, various institutions, they are much less accessible than we would want them to be. That's very important for Ukraine, that knowing that as a result of the war, we will have a bigger number of people with disabilities. So we need to provide barrier-free access of all our institutions. What concerns the healthcare institutions, the situation is slightly better. Some more than 40% of them are considered barrier-free. And regarding the educational institutions, that's much, much worse. That's why some kids don't have the access. So we can see the rating of the results regarding the various regions. We can see that the situation varies from region to region, but what I wanted to mention, and something that we should take into account, those regions where we have the high level of barrier-free, I can't confirm this by facts. That's my conclusion. Maybe somebody will correct me, that partially this high level of barrier-free based on the monitoring is connected with the fact that in some regions there are a lot of one-story buildings, schools, ambulatoriums. So as a result, we need to talk less about the needs in ramps, in elevators, etc., etc. Once again, it's better to build better means barrier-free. So our legislation already regulates these questions, and in accordance with the law of people have to create conditions for the key accesses to people with handicapped. It's important also to say what is important for the recovery, for the damaged objects, and what is not built from zero. If it's not possible to make these objects adapt, they need to be still realigned with some universal design improvements. We need to make certain efforts so they become accessible. From the key regulatory acts, we have the national strategy for creating a barrier-free space in Ukraine for the period of up to 2030. The purpose of the strategy is to create a barrier-free environment for all population groups to ensure equal opportunities for each person to exercise their rights, to receive services on equal basis, etc., etc. The Cabinet of Ministers has approved the plan for the implementation of the strategy, and it has a very important aspect that the local recovery plans and development should always include the section of creating the barrier-free space. Why this is important? Because all local authorities are starting their recovery plans, recovery and reconstruction plans, which become the basis for receiving finances for these recovery projects. So it's a call for everybody to take that into account and to foresee necessary sections in your recovery plans, because we don't have the overall methodology. When we talk about the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers, they really emphasize a lot on these barrier-free conditions. When we talk about this barrier-free, that's not the exhaustive list on the slide, but it's about really comprehensive changes. This could be ramps, this could be some handrails in restrooms, but it's much more than that. And that's also the inscription in Braille. It's elevators, convenient service windows, tactile tiles, contrasting inscriptions, absence of turnstiles, and wide doorways. I have seen the photograph from the Fastiv bus station where there was really, they did a good way to serve the wheelchaired people. So these changes are in the progress, and we should really make them go ahead. Barrier-free in Ukraine, this is the Ministry of Reconstruction is responsible, because before that this was scattered between the Ministry of Regions and Ministry of Infrastructure. Now it's the only ministry, the Ministry of Reconstruction, and that somehow combines effort, makes them more focused on that question. We have the inclusiveness of buildings and structures standards. Two more standards were added regarding the healthcare facilities and other. So it's important that they continue this work. What concerns the further directions in which solutions are needed, that's of course raising awareness on the ground, making sure that this should be done. Local authorities should incorporate accessibility principle. Public initiative proves its ability to induce changes on the ground. The representative of the president, exactly when asked the question about barrier-free, Tatiana Lomakia also wrote her post that there are some good public initiatives which are being implemented and which are a good example of changes on the ground. Further changes in building standards and their harmonization with EU regulations are necessary, and the owner must finance barrier-free access. This is often the case again with local authorities, so we should talk about them being informed about it and being aware about that. It is also urgent, important to finance the reconstruction according to the principles better than it was. At the same time, barrier-free access in healthcare facilities should be a mandatory condition for concluding a contract with the National Health Service from 2019. However, as monitoring data shows, this is not always the case. It's important to continue monitoring this accessibility, the barrier-free access, that we can see what should be changed. Many thanks for your attention. Many thanks, Oleksandra. We have now 45 minutes for discussion and Q&A. It seemed very interesting for me that all regions have now to introduce this barrier-free in all of their development plans. And if we have somebody on the call who is connected with planning and creating such plans, you have a great possibility right now to ask questions to these three professionals specialized in barrier-free accesses. You can ask them questions and you can reflect that in your work. So to discuss this special topic, we will be together with three experts from three organizations. That's Nina Matsiuk, the expert on inclusivity and barrier-free. That's a NGO, as was instructed by the initiative of Olena Zelenska on creating the program of mental health and the initiative on barrier-free to provide equal rights for all Ukrainians. Our second speaker is Olena Tsysar. She's the customer experience consultant. She is the partner in the service group. What this group is doing, it's also investigating and advising to businesses how to build without barriers, how to become more inclusive. The company is international. We hope to hear good practices from Olena. And our last speaker, it's Marina Yasenovska. It's the expert on human rights in European Disability Forum. That's the forum that tackles the issues of handicap, of disability. It's an umbrella organization that puts together the various organizations from Europe that are dealing with issues of disabled people. And we are very happy to have the video recording the Vice President of the European Disability Forum. So let us start. And as I said, we have 45 minutes for discussion and Q&A. Let's make our discussion within 30 minutes and 15 minutes to be left for Q&A. Please ask your questions in Q&A. Nina, we would like to ask you first, how do you work with making sure that you create the really barrier-free environment in Ukraine? One thing, let me correct. I have already completed my work in barrier-free organization, but I'm now an independent expert. But of course, our work continues under the initiative of the First Lady, because First Lady does cover this topic. Unfortunately, I want to make you sad after Oleksandra has shown, when she showed the barrier-free map. The point is that that's not a really proper survey was done when they did this monitoring of objects throughout whole Ukraine, there are actually two items there. For instance, about the universal restroom, there are some items that it's first of all it's available, and the second, does it have the pictogram that it's universal, and that's all. But unfortunately, this universal restroom, to make sure it's really universal, the one that can be used by each person, there is a number of certain requirements apart from the fact that it's there and there is the necessary pictogram. There should not be the the doors have to be wide. The doesn't have to be any anything that interferes with the access. There should be handrails, enough space to maneuver the wheelchair, the height of the basing and the mirror. I suspect that you have similar questions, internal and external, how to properly check the objects, how to make sure that this object for which you're responsible, which we're using, or you want them that in your community would be really barrier-free for all people. How can we find out how it should be, apart from the fact that we do have some state norms to structures and buildings which are mandatory for execution starting from 2018, and it may seem that then it should be no problem because the designers, engineers should design according to the existing state norms. But agree to me, we see after 2018 a lot of objects which were commissioned. Unfortunately, we can't call them barrier-free and accessible. And I'm very much sure that you have seen some really absurd solutions, like, for instance, ramps with the decline of 15%. It's not providing accessibility. It's actually unsafe and dramatic. Somebody was designing this, and somebody who accepted this work. So we have this question that the responsibility should be borne by all people, including us. Allow me to explain you about the instrument. It's important that after each information, there will be some instrument. We have developed such a manual with BRP, which is called Guide for Barrier-Free Access to Hromadas, to communities. It is written really with the plain language. You don't have to be a professional. Anyone can sort it out. We are defining some important notions and terms. What is the universal design? What is inclusivity? What is barrier-free access? Who are these groups of population who need that? Because we have some biases, because this accessibility, we think it's about only people with disability, which is not the case. And the next section, using the types of objects, we have defined and described what should be the requirements for each object. For instance, we took the hospitals, that is the medical institutions. We took the administrative buildings, museums, libraries, railway stations, so the objects which are used by most of the people. And in the end, there is this survey and checklist. And even if you don't know some norms or international standards, you can sort out and you can check any object, whether it's really barrier-free and accessible. It is on the website of BRP. You can use it. First of all, you can get to know the manual, and at the same time, you can download this questionnaire. Come to any object that is of interest to you and check that object. Then you will understand whether it meets or doesn't meet this criteria. What should be the height of the rails, what surface should be, which should be marking, etc., etc. I returned from a business trip in one of the cities. We made such a check, and it was very interesting from these questionnaires. I found a lot of challenge for myself. Unfortunately, that's done about the Brailler's print. There should be this dots, and when you there is there should be 7 millimeters, so it would be less than the part of the finger. But I have seen this size when I was trying to translate this. Then unfortunately there was a number of letters, but it didn't really mean anything. So we have quite a lot of challenges, much more than it seems to us from the first hand. And I really thought that this will not be our problem. The market will solve it. The undue producer will not have such orders from them. But unfortunately, the demand is here with the elements of barrier-free access. It's done really quickly. For instance, if you need to build up the ramp, it's much longer than to order this inscription blocks. So it's very logical that supposedly the person who doesn't see with the braille's print, they can find out and they can press and the doors will be opening. So apart from knowing norms and standards, it's important to also switch on the logic, which may see that we should really explain people. So I'm calling on you to get familiarize yourself with this barrier-free access guide manual. Please use this questionnaire because it's very important for us that as many as possible people would really understand that, because people are making a lot of decisions at various levels, and it's important that the topic of physical accessibility and barrier-free should not be only for some people. It should be available to everybody. Otherwise, we will not be able to sort out those mistakes. And agree to me, we have quite a lot of mistakes, and we don't simply have the right to duplicate them. Thank you so much, Nina. This was a very detailed description. I especially like the idea to somebody just tried to simply write the Brailler's print. It's very similar when somebody makes a translation into English. So it's a very evident story. Olena Tsysar, the client experience consultant and for service group partner. Olena, did you have such a client experience, and which the one you had? When the Brailler's print was exactly not with some uh, inscriptions that mean something, but really some random dots that looked like Brailler's print. I'm like from a different world. First of all, I don't know the Brailler's print. People who have lost eyesight through the war, they also don't know that. And that's a peculiarity of our news story. There is a lot of people who have this disability. They are not subject to some to the generally accepted norms. They can't be so easily helped with these known methods. Of course, we can provide them space, but yeah, the way they received their handicap in the adult age is also. I'm not an expert like Miss Nina. I'm very happy to see her. We know each other, and I think we are really complementing each other. I'm the person from business. I'm working a lot with the big business and state organizations in the client experience. Allow me to show you a different point of view. Maybe this will somehow inspire you, or maybe you will correct me that we need to find some common ground and find some common ground. Colleagues, I apologize. I just wanted to show you how we are joining this topic. And Miss Nina and Miss Oleksandra talked about the physical barrier-free when we started to work with this topic from the mid-2023. We looked at it in a more wide aspect, and we really also touched, apologies. Okay, you have to go back to the first slide. That's a little bit about myself. I'm working exactly for many years with client experience. I'm living in Austria. During the last 9 years, I'm working as the international consultant. And definitely, I see as a consumer, as an expert, I see certain tendencies that are developed and reached in Europe, certain accesses, certain approaches, how to interact with consumers. And colleagues and myself working in the subject of improving customer experience. That's a basis. It's taking away necessary barriers because I would not here separate clients as a special group. I would talk about human experience. And basing on this manual of barrier free and the initiatives that were mentioned today by the speakers, in this paradigm we are working, and we are trying to keep the overall general terminology. But again, when we consult the business, we are approaching it in such a way. We believe that first of all, and most important, is this cultural aspect, the importance of developing tolerance and understanding, acceptance that people are different, they have different needs, they have different characteristics. So we would talk more here, not only about the barrier-free, but about inclusiveness. That is the creating the space that allows each person to make their social contribution in life and be present in the any socium. That's of course a big dream. So the second step, we believe that we need to identify barriers that create discrimination. And number three is to overcome barriers, or at least creating conditions that would overcome barriers. And conditionally, we have divided this in our projects. We have a big project that was already implemented with Oshad Bank in the second half of 2023, and we have partial right to share this case. We came as our first step was to really of posing certain messages that we have to accept that people are different, have different ages, genders, wealth, race, language characteristics. But here exactly we have some psychological barriers. I will also talk about it. Cultural barriers, racial, anything you can come up with, a number of various characteristics which we can't sometimes perceive in other people. So it's important to have communications. And we have mentioned this already today, that yet certain initiatives are taking place and certain communicational changes have to take place. So number two, as already mentioned, is the identification of these barriers, these stones on the way of people, even on the life path of the people, or whenever people are receiving various services, closing certain needs. And that's where we see that we are advising not to look only at physical barriers, which have been mentioned a lot today. I'm not the expert, as I mentioned already. You have many more competent people, but I would really love that you pay attention to informational and mental barriers, then to psychological, and then to the rest of the barriers which are on our way. And we should not to do the recovery, apologize for using the word from your format, but rather creating a new culture, the culture where these barriers will be the ones that need to be dealt with and taken care of. We are doing workshops, conferences, various communications, how important it is, and many thanks, Ms. Nina, for the instrument, how important it is to have this regular audits, even on a Oshad Bank, who are doing the question on inclusivity and barrier-free since 2014. They have the network of inclusive branches all over Ukraine. Throughout the project, we started from making an audit, and we saw that a lot of instruments are not working. It's special ATMs, for instance, that could be done. This could be various other elements that should be done. And in our audit, we have to really make it and see whether they meet this criteria of barrier-free. But number two, what I would want to really advise, something that is already a world practice, I am learning the topic of barriers and frictions in the European Union and the United States. They say a lot about mega trends, which are part of this. It's what we call the reduced cognitive load, simplification of information, repacking of complicated information. And that's where you see just some examples how you work with this. This, of course, the business best practices. We're not talking only about the barrier-free access, but exactly it's our objectives are combined, because we have a lot of people with mental disorders, with stresses, with depression, etc., etc. Some temporary, some special. We have a lot of them. And a lot of our businesses like Kyivstar, Nova Poshta, they are simplifying their projects, repacking them, providing the elementary service in the frontline territories where it's important to receive information as soon as possible, to quickly perceive it in the proper language, etc., etc. Definitely, we can talk here about such things as devices, such as devices, screens, loudspeakers, which unfortunately are the triggers of certain, I mean, it's not about recovery, it's rebuilding of certain standards. And allow me to show you one small example. It happened, of course, you know, Bila. That's the concept is a shop near my home. They started one experiment 1 year ago, the hours of silence during the day from 14 to 15 every day. Every shop closed off advertising and music audio clips so that people with some disorders, with some autism, not to be distracted, because it can be a barrier, an irritant for clients with autism. Let me also finish 1 more minute. The most difficult to me, and that's a huge topic. I don't know whether it refers to our discussion. We are definitely working with this, with business. We are advising them to talk about the psychological barriers, stigmas, stereotypes. That's what we have faced when we worked with some projects. When employees, the personnel, they sometimes are afraid, then they're making heroic, or they are demonstrating too much emotions and too much confusion in front of certain people, clients. These are our barriers of communication in the psychological contact, the lack of knowledge about the rules of behavior and communication problems. I'm very much happy that we have a lot of NGOs in Ukraine. They undertake this job and they conduct various trainings, and through knowledge, through skills, they're trying to shape, and they're taking away these barriers. About some of them I already have mentioned, that we could do this. This presentation will be also with you, and if necessary, you can also read in more detail about it. I will not like to take too much of your time right now. I want to save some time so we can see overcoming barriers. First of all, there should be the audit of barriers, overcoming physical, communicational, informational various trainings and lectures on different aspects of communication with different people, staff training programs. That has been said a lot today, but again, this could be something that many thanks, Olena. You really have shown us a really different angle, thinking about the physical recovery of schools and hospitals. We have not looked at it, and it's all very much interesting. I would like to ask my colleagues to turn on video and to show to us the experience of the European Disability Forum. The Vice President wrote up a special video for us, recorded a special video for us. I'd like to ask colleagues to demonstrate it to us. Many thanks to you. From this organization, from Anke, we have also Maria Yasenovska, who is the expert on human rights in the European Disability Forum. I would like to ask Maria to share her experience and her impressions on how this barrier-free recovery is important for Ukraine, possible in Ukraine, what we should pay our attention to. I think Ms. Honta said main aspects, and exactly our organization is working in that direction to make sure that the European legislative framework in the process which are taking place in terms of accession of Ukraine to the European Union, first of all, it should meet the standards on People's with Disability Act that was approved by Ukraine, which was ratified by the European Union. So it's the overall framework for Ukraine and for the countries of the European Union. That's number one. Number two, the recovery of Ukraine, that includes not only the physical recovery, but a lot of reforms. It should be done in accordance with the convention, to the convention standards. It should run within the standards of accessibility, because much has been said about barrier-free, less was said about accessibility. We often said about that, let's put it this way, it's one the same thing, but it's not. I can tell you that the standards of accessibility, they are really prescribed in much detail in the Convention of Rights for People with Handicap, in the recommendations of the Committee of Ukraine, and many other documents. What concerns the barrier-free, I would say that it's more about something new for the Ukrainian legislation, and it's more about including into the process of taking away various social and psychological barriers, not only related to people with disabilities, but regarding other groups, including LGBTQI+ community, for instance, the representatives of the Roma communities, on some other groups, which are often in our society, they are subject to discrimination. And the public barriers that call for this discrimination in this civilized democratic society, which respects human rights, have to be taken away. so much attention is given to the barrier-free, but our organization is actually insisting on fitting to standards of accessibility. Also, Olena Tsysar said about the institutionalization, going away from the residential system, and that's also for people with disabilities, children and elderly people, onto the system that is based on support in communities. For children, it's mostly this system of family care. Again, for elderly, it's also family living. And our organization is working with Ukrainian NGOs and the Ukrainian government in terms of implementation of these reforms. And for us, it's also part of what could be called the barrier-free recovery of Ukraine. And then these requirements, they are also in the Ukrainian facility tool and in the requirements related to the accession of Ukraine to the European Union. The other very important aspect that Ms. Gonta said, it's about disaggregated data, because you all may know that at the moment we don't know yet which exact number of people with disability are in Ukraine, which number of people have received disability over the last few years. Of course, there is a lot of explanation about it, but that significantly complicates the overall understanding what resources have to be engaged. It's very important information related to how many women are with disability, how many men with disability, how many children, because that affects the humanitarian programs, the recovery programs, and the money that Ukraine is searching and international donors are trying to find in order to refer them to Ukraine. We also discussed about the direct participation of people with disabilities and some organizations who are presenting them. That's also one of the important aspects, because any accessible, barrier-free approaches without people with disability, we can't do it without them. And I'm very much sorry that now, even possibly I'm mistaken, but at least from the panelists, I have not seen, apart from Ms. Gonta, who was video recorded, I have not noticed people who are actually representing this community. Because I'm working in this organization, I don't have the handicap myself. And that's very important that people with disability would participate in all processes which pertain to them, and what refers to the accessible barrier-free recovery. That's very, very briefly and quickly. I had more reflections about what has been covered by the previous speakers. Yes, I would agree that there has to be, should be talking not only about the physical accessibility, we should talk about the informational accessibility, the communicational accessibility, and there are a lot of standards and a lot of instruments in this sphere. And it's really important to be trying to find out about it. Not all of them are here in the presentations that we have seen. If you're interested, please look up. A lot of useful information is on the European Forum on Disability. Ending my story, I wanted to say about partial accessibility. It's either there or it's not. Same as there is no partial barrier-free. If it's partial barrier-free, that some barriers are still there, so no barrier-free is there yet. Therefore, very important thing is this instruments with which we can evaluate the accessibility, the barrier-free, and not always it's perfect enough. Therefore, I'm advising you to turn to some national or local organizations who are actually representing the interests of people with disability, but because they have a lot of experience, including conducting various forms of audits of accessibility. Correspondingly, I also advise you to turn to our organization if you need any consultations or assistance. Please also look up the resources which are placed on our website. Of course, we will turn to you. I'm very much thankful for the things that you have explained to us. And I think our next approach to discussion of barrier-free. This should help take place with the participation of a lot of stakeholders who are directly can say something to the extent whether they are it's comfortable for them to use this or that object. I can see a good comment in chat. I want to tell to everybody that under the initiative of the Committee on Construction under the Ministry of Regions, with the wide participation of persons with disability, there's been developed a national standard about inclusivity, and our former minister signed it in the presence of the president. And Oleksandra, I don't know if she's with us, she actually cited this in her presentation. So not everything is bad, not everything is lost, and Ukrainian approach to the development of inclusive policies is still in progress. So, because I don't see any comments in chat that we have not replied yet, I would like to close this webinar a little bit earlier. I would like to wish a very nice evening. Please donate to tactical medicine in order to save lives, in order to save LIMS Leleka Foundation. You can make your own donation. Everything is good, and all the best. Many thanks to the European Union for making this possible.